So we're welcomed with Cathy Kristofferson from the Pipeline Awareness Network for the Northeast, and she'll be giving us a great presentation titled The Hydrogen Hoax and talking about hydrogen and energy.
So good evening, and thank you for inviting me. As Sarit said, I'm Cathy Kristofferson of the Pipeline Awareness Network for the Northeast, or PLAN. I think many of you probably already know about PLAN, but we were formed in early 2015 to formally take on Kinder Morgan Tennessee Gas in their NED and Connecticut expansion projects. The organization's mission is to prevent the overbuild of fossil fuel infrastructure and champion clean, sustainable energy solutions. So that would explain why PLAN is now, busy watching the fossil fuel industry promoting hydrogen as the solution to all our climate catastrophe woes. We see hydrogen as the latest tactic to distract and delay from our mandatory work of rapid decarbonization and electrification, while the fossil fuel industry works to keep the pipeline systems entrenched and fracked gas in service for decades to come. So tonight for the Green Drinks talk, I'm going to give a Hydrogen 101 and a quick review of some of what's going on all around us at the federal and state levels with hydrogen as an energy source, particularly for the building sector, both with proposed legislation and what the gas utilities and the pipeline companies are saying. So you may have been hearing about hydrogen, or as they call it, decarbonized gas, as the new clean green thing. I think some of us have been hearing about hydrogen cars for an awful lot of time. So hydrogen has been around. Hydrogen has been around for 100 years at least. But back in the spring, a group of us formed to kind of educate ourselves, to help educate the public by reading and talking to people about hydrogen as a fuel source. So that's kind of what I want to share tonight. So let's do what we call pull back the curtain and find out whether hydrogen is a climate solution that we've all been waiting for. The gas companies that heat our homes, right? They present hydrogen as this wonderful rainbow of possibilities. I think that by the end of tonight's presentation, you're going to figure out that that's a rainbow made of oil barrels and fracked gas. So, the writing is kind of on the wall for the gas companies. Massachusetts has plans to retrofit and electrify 1 million homes in the next 9 years. I think sadly we saw recently in the Globe that they're woefully behind on that 1 million homes, and it is coming upon October, so hopefully they'll get in motion. But those homes are no longer going to be paying for or using gas. Right, and additionally, some towns are trying to figure out ways to ban new gas hookups, trying to come up with a plan for that will get past the AG's office. The companies that build the transmission lines, the interstate, to get the gas here, Enbridge with their Algonquin line and Kinder Morgan with the Tennessee Gas, they're worried too, and the gas companies are feeling the pressure. Massachusetts has concrete goals for decarbonizing for each energy sector. We use fracked gas for both heating buildings and to generate electricity. Electric generation is kind of on track to switching over to cleaner sources like solar and wind and hydropower. And everybody's favorite energy efficiency, the energy you don't use is the best energy. But when we look at heating our buildings, we can see that over 80% our buildings are heated with fossil gas or some other fossil fuel like oil and propane. Electricity and solar together only account for a little over 15%. So that's a lot of leaking methane and carbon emissions coming out of our stoves and furnaces. So to me, our climate goals really need a different heating solution. But our solution needs to scale, right? There are over 1.7 million gas customers in Massachusetts. 1.3 of them are residential. So we have to really think big about our solutions. The utilities are proposing to keep the existing gas infrastructure in the ground and start piping hydrogen to buildings. You know, they want to start mixing a little bit in, blending it, maybe up to 20%, and then jump up to 100%. And, you know, that's because the gas utilities, they know they're on the hook to make things greener. Some of you may have seen the Eversource slides that were leaked in the Globe and Itai Barde in EE News. You know, this is what they're saying. They're in the fight of their life. Other slides were urging people to contact legislators in favor of fossil fuels, and they warned about the anti-gas pressure. Another slide suggested that people should play on the fears of power outages in the public, which for me is a little bit humorous because the two biggest gas providers, being Eversource and National Grid, are also electricity providers. So it seems an interesting approach, but this is their idea. This is Eversource, another leaked slide, and they're just calling it cleaner gas. Right? They're going to start with some over here, right, leak reduction in the near term, and they are trying for something they called responsible natural gas, which makes me wonder, is everything we have irresponsible? I think probably we would say yes. They're gonna, you know, in the midterm, come along to cleaner physical gas, move to power to gas, but you can see that the end goal is hydrogen. They're not pretending anymore. This is what they're doing. They're kind of grasping at straws, and hydrogen was the first straw to come along. You know, so before I get too far, you know, what the heck is hydrogen? You know, if we go out at night and look up, there it is, right? It's the most common element. It's what the stars are made of. It's also the H in H2O of water, but it's also the H of CH4 of methane. It's the lightest element, which means it moves around really easily. It's a very, very small molecule with low viscosity, which means therefore it's prone to leakage. So if you think about pipes and leaking, its flammability range is pretty high. About 30% hydrogen to air ratio, just a little spark and boom. I think what mostly I resist the temptation to put the Hindenburg in a slide, but you know, that's hydrogen. It reacts with almost all other elements. So even though it's the most common element, it doesn't exist by itself. So if we want hydrogen for fuel, we have to make it. The United States makes about 1/7 of the world's supply. That's 11 million tons. You know, so what can it be used for? Over half of the hydrogen that the US makes now is used in petroleum refineries. Most of the food that people eat is made with a hydrogen fertilizer. We know that it's used in food processing because everyone learned about hydrogenated oil, right? And most famously, everybody will know that it is rocket fuel. So, you know, this is already a very large hydrogen industry in the US. There are kind of 4 ways that hydrogen can bring us to a clean energy future. We know that renewables are intermittent. So sometimes there's too much energy being created by turbines or solar. So converting it into hydrogen to use for electricity later, you can store it for about 8 or 10 hours to smooth out energy use, the intermittency. For long distance transportation, whether it's shipping or big trucking, hydrogen fuel cells are a better solution than a lot of lithium batteries, which are a tremendous amount of weight and a lot of swapping. I think Jane, Lynn, and I both drive Bolts, and I don't, you know, the charging infrastructure in the United States, whether it gets there or not, long distance transportation is going to be something that we want to look at hydrogen fuel cells for. And also there are industrial processes like cement and steel and glass making that need a really high heat fuel. So instead of burning fossil fuels for them, we can substitute hydrogen as a way to clean up the process. I think I saw recently green steel come out of Sweden. You know, as a Kristofferson, I would have to mention a Swedish thing that's good, and that will be it. So I think, you know, with the limited amount of clean green hydrogen that we have, we need to use it for what we've been calling the last mile. Don't use it for the low-hanging fruit of heating our buildings and what's that. Because right now, 98.5% of the hydrogen is made from fossil fuels. Only 1.5% of hydrogen worldwide is made from solar and wind, right? Steam methane reformation, which I will describe later, SMR is probably what you're gonna hear about for hydrogen. And mainly that is good old fracked gas, right? Leaking all the way from the fracking field to the plant where they'll make it, and then emitting CO2 as it goes. This is a schematic for piping hydrogen. It looks pretty familiar to Rose, Jane, and probably many of you, right? There's the fracking field, there's a magic processing, then you get into transmission, into distribution, and into homes. So except for this little processing here, it's exactly like piping gas. So that beautiful rainbow of hydrogen, it's essentially fossil fuels with a whole load of fresh water, which is an issue on its own. So here's a little chemistry that we all learned so long ago in school. This is the process for making hydrogen from fossil fuels, and what happens after the methane is, it happens after the methane is refined, right? So this is what I was saying is called steam methane reformation, or reforming the methane molecules, right? So when you make hydrogen from fossil gas or methane as the feedstock, you heat up water to a very high temperature to make the steam. And guess what you use to make the steam? More fracked gas, right? So more methane. The steam reacts with the methane, and the molecules split up, and you end up with hydrogen, carbon dioxide mainly, and a little bit of carbon monoxide for the O's that didn't get enough to be two. So if we look at the process a little more closely, we can see that, you know, the methane is going in. Remember, right? Gas pipes leak all the way at every juncture. Next, we have a whole lot of fresh water going in. And, you know, that can be a problem in parts of the country and across the globe, right? If this is the global solution for energy. I was listening to one webinar on this. It was a European presentation, but someone said about, well, there's no clean water here and here and here. And they're like, well, just build a desalination plant. So I'm like, oh, okay, that's a solution. We'll just get the water from the ocean because that'll just work. Right, and then you get your output. You got your 1 ton of hydrogen. But look, you got 11 tons of carbon pollution to make your 1 ton of hydrogen. And that's our old friend carbon dioxide, right? Rising right up into the atmosphere. It really makes us wonder how they say hydrogen is so clean and green. Well, they do, and the reason they do is they start talking about capturing that carbon dioxide and burying it underground, right? And that's good in theory, maybe. It's a process that is not currently happening. It's also a very expensive process because you do nothing but bury it underground. It doesn't come out for use. Currently, the carbon capture that's going on in the US, the carbon is used for actually extracting oil. So they do capture it, but they immediately use it and then up it goes, right? It's not stored. And the other thing about this untested technology is nobody knows how long it will stay underground, right? It's going to leak. It's light and it's going to come up, right? We us pipeline people, as they call us, we've seen so much go on underground with frack outs and what that. There's gaps in the earth. It's not like there's some cement cover. And whatever you put in there, it does tend to leak out slowly. There was a really great study in mid-August from Professor Howarth and Jacobson from Cornell and Stanford. They did the first peer-reviewed study of blue hydrogen. And they found that blue hydrogen is significantly higher emissions than just burning the natural gas, right? Or coal for heat. And the life cycle of those greenhouse gas emissions of blue hydrogen were only marginally better than gray hydrogen. So all of that talk of carbon sequestration is the answer. And it's like I remember that one presentation, the guy's going, it's a zero base, it's zero carbon. It's not. I'll give Jane the links to all of this. The study is really easy to read for most folks, right? They did that intentionally because a big scientific thing that nobody can understand is not useful for all of us. They did a really easy to read. Both of them have done webinars recently. One, Mr. Howarth presented to Congress on the problems of this, and Mr. Jacobson did a great presentation. They're both short, really easy to understand, and I'll send that along. But the point that both of them want to make is that if only 1.5% of the hydrogen is really classified as green, it's actually a precious resource that we should only use where we have no other option. We shouldn't immediately rush to pipe it into our homes. And I see that Rose has her hand up.
Yeah, I wonder if you have a real quick description of the difference between gray, green, and blue hydrogen.
Sure. So green is coming, but so gray is made with methane. Blue is gray hydrogen where the carbon is stored, right? And so one of the things they don't tell you is that it takes more methane to store it, right? Every process, this is such a good scheme by the fossil fuel industry to present this low carbon, only emission is water, right? How many times have we seen the TV commercials with just some drips of water coming out of the muffler? That's it, folks, right? But the whole process, it's sort of like fracking. Nobody counts the whole life cycle, how you got to that hydrogen and all of the gas that it takes to get there. And green hydrogen is made from water, splitting the H2 off the O.
Great.
And
thanks.
that is actually in 2 more slides, because I wanted to put a warning for us pipeline folks that carbon capture and sequestration, it requires more pipelines, right? And they leak too, and they are not small. I would urge everyone to read this article in the Huffington Post about a CO2 pipeline that ruptured in Mississippi, sickening dozens of people with this green fog that it took ages for people to figure out what it was. It's carbon dioxide poisoning. Isn't that why we have CO2 things in our homes back when we had gas furnaces? And these are not small pipelines. These are 48-inch pipelines, sort of make the 36-inch pipe that went into Sandusfield look small. This is the proposed network of shipping the carbon dioxide around to be sequestered somewhere. I saw in this map here, the gray areas seem to be the places in the United States that have underground cavern areas that would be, quote, good for storing carbon. So selfishly, we could be happy that we don't see one under Massachusetts or anywhere in the Northeast. But that means if we're processing blue hydrogen up here, we have to ship that stuff somewhere. and why we want to keep creating fuels that need to be shipped elsewhere through EJ communities and giant pipelines that put all of those folks at risk even further. I don't really understand, but that is kind of what we do. And so this rose is green hydrogen from electrolysis. So the input is water. The chemistry is a whole lot simpler because with an electric charge, you sort of take the H off the O, right? And you end up with each molecule of water, you get one molecule of hydrogen and half of an oxygen. So the one question I have is, where's all that fresh water coming from? Over and over, we find the fossil fuel industry is just coming for our water. We have historic droughts everywhere. It's really sad to imagine that our clean water will go from being shot into rocks to push more gas out to also being used to create the hydrogen, right? And so we have a hydrogen and the electricity going into the electrolyzer. I think people from grade school might remember the potato battery. Well, the electrolyzer is the potato, right? Hydrogen made this way, like I was saying, is good for some purposes, especially if the electricity was going to, quote, go to waste. So say it's in the middle of the night and the wind turbines out there off Nantucket are madly spinning around. Making electricity from that is a good thing, right? It may lose 30% in its efficiency, but it was electricity that was going to, quote, go to waste. But you can make electricity, make it into hydrogen, store it, and then turn it back into electricity and run everyone's air conditioner when we all get up and are overheated from our burning globe. There are plans to make hydrogen this way. Electric companies, as we know, right, they have to start making a tremendous amount of green energy to meet mandated levels in the RPS in our nice new next gen climate law. What we don't want is them building a whole lot more peaker plants. So hydrogen stored this way can be part of green electric generation. But one thing that we have to watch out for is that, right, the majority of the electricity on the grid is currently predominantly made from methane, right? So using electrolyzers that are directly connected to the green energy generation, say an electrolyzer out there in Salem connected to turbines, or I should say Somerset to keep Pat Haddad happy. So it would come right in there. And that you would know is truly green hydrogen. Store it, put it on the grid, and this is a good use of green. But if not, right, we're just right back to more fracking, and it's not the solutions that we're looking for. So here is some of our rainbow, right? And the companies that are selling hydrogen have this clever tactic of getting everyone confused about colors. I myself had to learn that pink hydrogen is a hydrogen that comes from nuclear, because in a few slides, I'll talk about the infrastructure bill. And in the infrastructure bill, they have both nuclear and coal. So, brown and pink. But I think that what you'll see is that either green from solar or yellow, which is hydrogen made from electrolysis with solar power. It's all coming from fossil fuels. And, behold, the hydrogen rainbow. It's marketing, distraction. So the cost of hydrogen is somewhat best understood comparing it with other forms of energy. So if we suppose that we have 100 units of energy and we take that 100 units and make hydrogen, transport it, leak some of it, and use it to run the hydrogen boiler, we get about 46 units out of our 100 units. The efficiency is pretty poor. You know, or next you could use that hundreds of units, directly run an air source heat pump. Even with the power line losses, you get 270 units of work out of it. You get more than you put in. So look at the comparison of burning hydrogen instead of just using the electricity, especially in something that's very efficient, like our heat pumps, the mini splits. The other cost that we're going to see is the people who own homes and buildings are going to start looking at these numbers, and they're going to transition to electrification. That means that people who don't own their home or their buildings, who are low income or live in EJ, they're going to be paying much more on their bills, because as we know, so many of the charges, the infrastructure charges, are socialized across the ratepayer base. And as the ratepayer base shrinks, everybody has to pay a bit more. And so the folks who can least afford it are going to be paying for the infrastructure changes that are going to be required to run hydrogen into our homes. You know, so what else are we going to have to pay for? You know, so we need 30% more methane, because as you saw, to make it, you need more steam, you need it as a feedstock, and then you need more of it to heat the water to create the steam to do the reforming. We need people and their shiny new equipment, so we're going to have to buy all of that. We need new pipes and pipelines, because hydrogen causes steel pipes to embrittle and crack and cause leaks. They also need to be of a material that contain that super tiny molecule that moves. The other cute thing for some of us is that compressors will need to be 3 times larger to push hydrogen around. Everyone will have to replace all of their appliances, because nobody certifies equipment for hydrogen in the US or Canada, so in North America. On an efficiency basis, you have to burn 6 times more hydrogen to get the same energy result that we did from electricity. I think the group that I've been in talking about this, they're calling it the hydrogen surcharge. I think us pipeline people, we might call it a hydrogen tax, right? Kind of like our pipeline tax, it's a hydrogen tax. But so that might lead us to wonder, well, is hydrogen safe, right? We know if we start from the baseline, since June, there's been 3 homes that have blown up in Massachusetts due to gas leaks, right? The 60-year-old man that just died in Maynard because the service line from the street leaked into the crawl space under his home and it exploded. The utilities don't keep data on these events. I think those of us watching it all are paying attention, but average people don't seem to have the attention span to realize that this fuel they pipe into our homes and the one they want to continue piping into our homes is not very safe. And so if we stop and look for a moment, this is a raging hydrogen fire in your kitchen. So hydrogen burns with a pale blue flame that is almost invisible in the daylight hours. You can't smell it because it's such a small molecule and it attaches to everything. There's no mercaptan solution for hydrogen yet to add an odorant or a colorant or anything that will let you know it's there. When it burns, it doesn't give off much heat, so you can't feel it. But since hydrogen is lighter than air, the fire immediately expands upward. There is a Newton firefighter in this group that is trying to look at the issues of hydrogen for us in Massachusetts. And he is saying that the firefighters don't know what's coming. There is no planning for this, although the gas companies are talking about decarbonizing like next year, right? They just want to get going. They want to put from 4 to 80% into the fossil gas. They would need special detectors. I think I noticed one of them was using sort of like a FLIR that we use to see what's coming out of a compressor station. But, you know, imagine riding your bike down the street and riding right into a hydrogen leak. You're not even going to know there's a fire there until you're in it. You know, so is it healthy? Well, when you burn hydrogen, it creates 6 times as much NOx, right? Nitrogen oxides, as burning gas. And so nitrogen oxides cause asthma and other respiratory things. It burns through the ozone layer, right? The original hole in our atmosphere. So when you combust hydrogen with oxygen in your home to cook food, you're just making NOx in your kitchen. It doesn't make me understand why people will be wanting to cook with gas hydrogen blend or pure hydrogen in their kitchen. And so the ultimate question is, you know, does it cut emissions? Remembering that we would need 30% more methane just to get to this point, right? It leaks from the drill tip to the burner tip, right? The whole way. We're doing 130% of the methane now. Steam methane reforming leaks gas and carbon dioxide. Burning pure hydrogen makes nitrous oxide, right? Like I said, the greenhouse gas that harms the ozone layer. The green hydrogen is most often made from grid electricity, which is likely made from majority methane. So we would kind of say hydrogen does not cut emissions. So you have to ask yourself, why are we doing this and what's the point? This is the point, right? They're desperate. So we really can't be friendly to our utilities. We need to push them. We need to be saying no to hydrogen, no. You know, you can call it decarbonized gas, but it's still hydrogen, right? And so we need to start calling it what it really is, and that's fossil hydrogen, like we call it fossil gas. The utilities are proposing to start piping 1%, moving on up to 100%. They claim they can get to quote net zero, but we don't, you know, I keep saying we don't need net zero, man, we need 0, 0. We can decarbonize home heating through electrification, heat pumps, geomicrodistricts, really deep dive energy efficiency, but not moving us to just another thing to burn. So if we look at what our politicians are saying, here's our AG asking for the future of gas investigation, which right is at the DPU now is on docket 2080. In her request for the investigation, she said, what's the potential for power to gas? Sorry for the acronym, and she did it, not me. P to G is power to gas. And can it deliver? And have the gas distribution utilities investigated the use of hydrogen? So there she's saying, hey, you're going to put hydrogen in the pipes that go under our streets? And this is Assistant Secretary Chang talking about the Clean Energy and Climate Plan, right in there in the review. They got so many comments advocating to incentivize biofuels, hydrogen, and renewable natural gas. You know, they really need to hear from us as well. And this was the slide I added last night, right? Here's Governor Baker signing an executive order to establish the first in the nation commission on clean heat. But right in the opening paragraph, you see longer term decline in emissions from heating fuels. Not stop combusting things in our home, just how to make it a little bit less, right? And we have to, I mean, all we can do is keep pushing, right? That's kind of what we've always done. But so to get back to the P to G, this is the Enbridge slide, investing in power to gas. This is the future to them. They take their electricity, they run it through an electrolyzer, they store it in a storage tank. And the words down there for number 3 are really small, so I will read it to say, instead of converting the hydrogen back into electricity, the hydrogen may be blended into the natural gas distribution system at a predetermined percentage to reduce the carbon content of the gas. This is keeping the pipeline systems entrenched for the foreseeable future. I'll use Enbridge again because actually in Canada, Enbridge is an LDC like Berkshire Gas or Boston Gas or Colonial Gas. And this is a pilot they have going. So they are going to blend in at 2%. And one of the reasons I like to show this slide is here is their renewables, right? Solar panels and a nice turbine coming into electricity, coming up to make green hydrogen. And the first thing they do is they blend it with blue hydrogen and call it renewable hydrogen and store it for a bit, blend it in and pipe it into the street. This is the pilot that they have running. They have 2 pilots, one in Ontario and one in Quebec. And we know that that area has actual real green electricity, right? This is where Hydro-Quebec, we're all, Massachusetts and New York are all trying to get our green energy from them. But this is what they're going to use it for, to pipe into homes. It is so not what we wanted. I'll show you this slide because this is Enbridge's sustainability, and they say, hey, look, we moved 20% of the natural gas on the our interstate pipelines. So we're actively exploring how much hydrogen we can blend into the transmission system. And I can tell you that Kinder Morgan is making the same claim. They are also claiming that they can move carbon capture. So they are looking to use their pipeline systems for all of this whole plan, right? This whole scheme of hydrogen and the pipelines, these same pipelines. That one of the interesting things I read about hydrogen put into the pipelines is that it doesn't actually blend, because like I said, it doesn't stick to anything, right? So they can actually put hydrogen in the pipe in Texas, send it up to Massachusetts and pull it off and have just the hydrogen. And very curious what they're gonna do with that. But it's not all the big guys. Here's Eversource and the new CEO. Eversource is researching how to repurpose its natural gas system to distribute clean hydrogen. The utility plans to spend billions of dollars upgrading pipes that distribute natural gas, and ratepayers will be responsible for covering the cost. They're also renewing their contracts with gas suppliers, and they don't seem to really care that they're clashing with the next gen bill, right? It's not just hydrogen, Eversource. Here is National Grid, and here is the Berkshire Gas president and CEO talking in New York about hydrogen as the gas utilities. And it's not local, so we can go up to the president. Right here is President Biden's, the first energy Earthshot he launched in June was the hydrogen shot, right? He wants to reduce the cost of green hydrogen so that by 80%. So this is their 111, right? $1 for 1 kilogram in 1 decade. At the Earthshot, the first summit this month, our friend Joe Manchin described hydrogen as the all of the above fuel. So we will use this fuel for everything. And it just needs to think of all. I have more to say about Mr. Manchin in a minute. Hydrogen, you might ask, in the infrastructure build, right? Everything with, the pushing and pushing to get this hydrogen bill through because there's so much good about roads and bridges and that sort of infrastructure. But also we can see what Joe Manchin meant by all of the above in this bill. If you pull up the bill, which it's thousands of lines because it's double-spaced, it has gigantic margins. There's 166 occurrences of the word hydrogen in this big infrastructure bill. Basically, make it with anything and use it for everything. It specifically promotes hydrogen for heat and hot water. So here we are as a comfort heating and hot water requirement transmitted by pipelines. And the thing that's interesting is you'll see that now they call it clean hydrogen. We've dispensed with the rainbow, and we make our own definition of clean hydrogen in the infrastructure bill. So it is something that creates a carbon intensity equal to or less than 2 kilograms of carbon dioxide equivalent, blah, 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 blah. Clean hydrogen production will come from natural gas, coal, renewable energy sources, nuclear energy, and biomass. So we have dispensed with the rainbow and just gone straight to what we wanted to do. The other thing that is in the infrastructure bill is $8 billion for 4 regional clean hydrogen hubs, 2 of which must come from regions of the country with the greatest natural gas resources. So this Appalachian one that is in the bill, which I am calling the Joe Manchin Hub, is here. It will establish regional hub for making, quote, clean hydrogen from natural gas liquids, hydrogen produced from steam methane reforming of natural gas feedstocks. The other sad thing, right? So there are 2 hubs from the fracked gas strongholds. One must be from nuclear and one can be from renewable sources. The end uses of hydrogen demonstrated at these hubs must be power generation, transportation, heating, and industrial uses. So off the bat, we're no longer using our precious resource for the things that we really need it for. And if you don't want to believe my assessment of the bill, here is Bloomberg. Their headline just about says it all. Hydrogen plan isn't very green. You know, they talk about the hubs, and it said something like coal was listed as a potential source. Even they seem to be somewhat surprised. And here is the, you know, the reconciliation bill out there in Mr. Neal's district. Y'all are pushing him, right, to get this through Ways and Means. And of course, there is a brand new tax credit for the production of clean hydrogen, and yet another definition that is qualified clean hydrogen. And the qualification here, you see, it just needs to be 40% reduction of SMR from fracked gas, which is just 40% less than gray hydrogen tax credit. Here in Massachusetts, our old friend Rep. Tom Golden, the used to be chair of TUE, Telecom Utilities and Energy, has filed this House 3887 to look into the development and utilization of renewable natural gas and low carbon hydrogen for heating end uses. I'm going to start sounding like a broken record, but this is what they're going for. And this is our also other BFF, AIM, is teamed up with UMass to do a study on supplementing or replacing low carbon heating fuel with hydrogen. There is a forum coming up on November 7th. Really hoping that they will do a live stream of that so everyone across the state can attend. Currently, they are not. They are suggesting it will be $50 to go and hear from Mr. Golden, Mike Barrett, Rep. Roy, the 2 chairs, for what this study, and the UMass Lowell person. And I just wanted to give a very busy slide on what is meant by decarbonizing. You don't really need to read it all. If you just glance really quickly, you'll see the numbers next to the percentages. They're all pretty small, right? And in all those cases, the rest is fracked gas, right? So that Ontario one that I showed you in the gas distribution, they're going to blend up to 2%, 98% fracked gas, right? Southern California has a pilot. They're going to blend from 1, maybe they'll get to 20. You might have heard the New York, Long Island is piloting a peaker that's going to blend from 5, maybe they can get to 30. None of the turbines can do more than 30, but they're going to have to incrementally check on that nitrous oxide emissions, the safety that their peaker is in. And actually now they seem to be worried about the performance because like we said, it is inefficient. And if they decrease the efficiency of their turbine, well, gee, maybe it won't be worth it. We saw that Peabody is going to have to add a catalytic converter to deal with those NOx emissions to stay under the air permit. And then there are the appliances. I think that my question is, right, we need to remember that Eversource, at the beginning, I said they are planning to spend billions of ratepayer money to replace the gas pipelines with hydrogen compatible pipelines. They're just one of the gas companies in the Commonwealth. And if we have to spend those billions of dollars on the pipeline system and then billions of dollars to replace our gas appliances, why the heck aren't we just spending those billions on electrifying everything, right? Why are we going through this problem? And piped hydrogen costs more, it's inefficient, it is inequitable, it emits more greenhouse gases, it harms public health, and it's more dangerous than gas. I don't think hydrogen is what we want. So thank you, Beat, for inviting me.
Really great and eye-opening, Cathy. It's just bizarre why we would be doing this other than the reason you stated.
It's a delay and distract and delay. It's what we see so much, right? But yeah, sorry to cut you off, Jean.
No, I'd like to invite everybody on here to feel free to unmute yourselves to ask Cathy questions. It was a information dense energy.
Yeah, sorry.
I think all of us should be talking to our legislators and pointing out to them, this would mean replacing every bloody pipeline, all the appliances. If you're going to do that, just go electric.
Yeah, that was one question I put in the chat was you can't run very much hydrogen through existing pipelines. They all need to be upgraded as well. So there's even lots of efficiency that way.
Right, and I read that, the meters at the meter stations coming off the interstate pipeline, they are only accurate up to 4%. So, right, and because I couldn't figure out why the interstate guys were mixing such a small amount, right? They have these huge hoses for gas. But if they can't meter what's coming off the pipe and charge properly, that's no good for them, right? That's sort of how we know. It wasn't that always the reason why the interstate pipeline guys said their stuff doesn't leak, because that's lost product. That's lost product to them, and the distribution folks just charge the ratepayer for what's leaked, so they have no incentive to fix it. But yeah, Rose, I don't understand why. On the one hand, we can't electrify buildings because people can't afford to change all their equipment, but we can swap out all of the infrastructure. And we know, right? Aren't we famous in the United States for our 150-year-old gas infrastructure?
Yeah.
Some of it in Boston, I think you've seen that it's just held together with mud. It's kind of broken, but the earth around it is holding it in place. And as soon as they dig in to look, it all falls apart. But, you know, we're industrious here, right? In Massachusetts, the first gas pipelines were made of wood. That's how long we've been piping gas in Massachusetts. Some of them are pretty old. Springfield area's got some really old stuff.
I wonder if there's any way to get a total cost accounting for both upgrading so everyone can switch to hydrogen versus giving everyone new electric appliances and upgrading the grid to handle full electrification.
Yeah.
It'd be really interesting to see the side-by-side cost analysis.
Well, it would, and the geothermal that, you know, network geothermal for big apartment buildings and that are so much better idea. And, you know, most of us don't live in those sorts of area. I have an air source heat pump here that I did myself because individual homes need individual. But like then one of the early slides is about, we have to think to scale, right? We saw in Merrimack Valley, right, when Columbia Gas blew it up and people ran around and gave them, didn't Columbia Gas run around and give everybody a space heater and then learned that the electric system in those tenement houses was not in good enough shape to run a space heater? You know, these buildings, they need to be fixed, and they should be fixed for electrify. Don't go in there and pump them up enough to push hydrogen at bits. Yeah, Jane.
It occurs to me, this also is making sure we stay reliant on getting a fuel from far away, potentially then shipping back our carbon to be buried far away, instead of going local, where we can have local jobs, fixing local homes, bringing in our own new appliances. But we could be creating a very much more local economy that benefits all of us as individuals, instead of benefiting the oil companies as they now become hydrogen companies.
Right, and that's you know, that same story about putting in the pipelines, all the local jobs. You know, we're local, we're the flag people, right? And all of the pipeline work. I happened to be there one day when the road was stopped for hours in Sandusfield, and I walked down all of the trucks. There were no Massachusetts plates. There was, you know, Mississippi and Oklahoma and Texas and Florida. That's where the workers come from. And that's what will happen if we just start swapping out all the pipes where's the distributed energy? Where's the local small grid, the microgrids and all of that? That's what we want.